Okay, welcome everybody to the return of Ghostly Stories, brought to you by Half Past Dead Paranormal Radio here on YouTube Live Events. And I was supposed to have a co-host tonight, but unfortunately an emergency came up and Christina wasn't able to be with me. So hope you guys enjoy my solo routine. Before I get into the stories, I want to mention that there are millions and millions of ghost stories out there. Okay. Some are supposedly true, and some are made up campfire stories, which I love both kinds. So as I tell you these stories tonight, just keep in mind it could be real. So hug your pillow real close when you go to bed tonight, because they may be true. And also, I have 4 stories for you, and of course a little bit of commentary from yours truly, and also anything that pops up in the chat over here. I am watching diligently, of course. So it may not run a full hour, but it's probably going to run somewhere in the neighborhood. So anyway, without further ado, welcome everybody in the chat room. Mary, Meg, Paul, whoever else may be over there that I'm not seeing. The first story that I have for you is called Devil on Washington Rock, and it's retold by S.E. Schlauser, which tells most of these stories that I have. The dream was so vivid she didn't realize at first that it was a dream. The party was crowded, the guests cheerful, the food delicious. Then a rumor began to circulate among the guests. The devil was coming to the party. The devil was on his way. She didn't pay much attention at first until a hush came over the crowd. Turning to see what it was, she saw a tall, handsome, blond man standing in the doorway greeting his hostess. Around her, the murmurings began. It was the devil. He had come. She watched out of the corner of her eye as the devil made the rounds of the room. He looked so ordinary. It was hard to believe he was the devil. Then he came to her group. As soon as he joined them, she knew the rumor was true. This was not someone to be trifled with. Frightened, she grabbed for a Bible her hostess had left lying on the nearby end table and threw it at the devil. For a moment, their eyes locked. The devil's eyes were full of ferocious anger, terrible evil, and malevolent malice directed right at her. She thought she was dead. Then she woke. And lying trembling in her bed with the light on until dawn. The next morning was the end of term. Her parents and younger sister helped her clear out her dorm room and pack the car. It was dusk before they settled into their seats for the 2-hour drive home. They talked excitedly as they drove towards their home in New Jersey, interrupting each other often, contradicting themselves and laughing. It was good to be together again. They were 15 minutes from home when they left the highway. Her father turned onto Washington Rock Road that led up the mountain, through the sea bend, around the Washington Rock State Park, and then down the other side of the mountain. As they drove up the steep hill, a noisy motorcycle tailgated them, trying to pass even though the road was windy and narrow. Finally, the hill grew so steep that the driver was forced to slow down, and eventually they pulled away from him entirely. The car reached the top of the hill and started around the long C curve that took them through one end of the park. The park was dark and still. The whole family automatically looked to their right, out over the gorgeous view of the New York City skyline. They all saw the small park cart sitting next to the road just inside the park boundary. It was parked directly underneath the only street light where you couldn't fail to see it. And inside the vehicle, she started trembling fiercely. Inside the vehicle was a tall, handsome blond man with eyes full of ferocious anger, terrible evil, and malevolent malice. It was the man from her dream, the man everyone said was the devil. The tension in the car was palpable. She had mentioned her dream to no one, but her parents and her sister all felt the evil pulsing from the still figure in the cart. No one spoke as they drove past the man. Suddenly, the engine gave a cough. Her father gunned the motor once, twice, in a silent, desperate battle to keep moving. She gripped her hands together, praying silently as she stared at the figure opposite the car. The engine caught again, and her father pressed down hard on the accelerator. Then they were past the man and roaring away from the park and towards the downward slope of the mountain. She was sweating profusely, unable to stop shaking. She looked back out the window at the man in the park and saw the motorcycle come roaring up last to the top of the hill. It drove halfway across the seabed, and as it drew opposite the figure in the cart, she heard the engine of the motorcycle cough and then stall. And then the park was out of view, and they were riding silently towards home, not daring to speak until they were safely indoors. She often wondered what happened to the man on the motorcycle. So what happened to the man on the motorcycle? Did the devil get him? Kind of a coincidence, wouldn't you think, that she had a dream about this person and seen the exact same figure in real life? As I said, you never know. Some of these may be true. Okay, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it, buddy. So just remember, folks, that if you see a man in a cart with blonde hair, malicious anger, and all that kind of stuff, might be the devil. Might want to turn and go the other way. Just saying. Okay. This story is called Dispatched. And it's a spooky South Carolina ghost story, so gotta love South Carolina. And as I said, retold by S.E. Schlosser. There was something odd in the tone of the dispatcher's voice when he called to tell me a person needed picking up at Bramlett Road late one summer night in 1947. I shuddered when I heard the name of the street. I did not want to go anywhere near this area, especially at midnight. But I drove a yellow cab, and it was my job to pick up a call when it came. I swallowed and headed toward Bramlett Road and the slaughter yards. I'd been out of town when the incident happened. I called it an incident, but it was murder, plain and not so simple. A fellow named Brown, who drove a cab with our company, was robbed and stabbed to death in his cab. Next day, a man named Willie Earl was picked up by the police the very next day and put in jail for the crime, though he denied doing it. Then a bunch of hotheads who drove cabs for our company gathered together, passed around a bottle of whiskey, and talking about getting the fellow who stabbed Brown. One of the men went out and borrowed a shotgun, and the mob drove to the jail, grabbed Earl, and threw him in the back of one of the cabs. The hotheads took him to the slaughter yards, and they dragged Earl forcibly from the cab and started beating him. A man pulled a knife and waded into the mob with it, and Earl shouted, "Lord, you killed me." That's when the fellow with the shotgun put a bullet in his head, reloaded, and shot him twice more. When the mob was sure he was dead, they climbed back into their separate cabs and fanned out, each heading back to the city by a different route. Eventually, word got out, and 31 fellows were arrested for the crime, but they were all acquitted by a jury of their peers. After the incident, the slaughterhouse section of Bramlett Road got a bad reputation. No one in the cab company much liked driving there, especially at night. Folks claimed it was haunted by the ghost of Willie Earl. I shivered as I pulled onto Bramlett Road and slowed down to look for my passenger. No one was there. I parked the cab and got out to have a quick smoke while I waited. All at once, the temperature around me plummeted. I froze in place, suddenly terrified as someone moaned in terror from the other side of the road. The sound scraped my nerves raw. I could hear the unmistakable thud of hammering fists, and the darkness was filled with swirling black silhouettes pounding on something or someone. I fumbled for the icy cold door handle as a man shouted agony, "Lord, you killed me." I threw myself inside the cab as a gun exploded, cutting off the man's cries. The shot was swiftly followed by two more. I squealed the tires as I spun the cab around. A tall, battered figure that glowed just enough for me to see its lolling head, the blood-stained, dead features. The knife-torn clothes blocked the road in front of me. I gasped, floored the gas pedal, and swerved around it, heart hammering so hard it hurt my ribs. I was still trembling when I slammed into the office a few minutes later and told the dispatcher I was quitting. Then I grabbed my things and headed for home, lickety-split. There was no way I was ever going to Bramlett Road ever again, and I never did. So, do you think the ghost of Willie Earl was really there? Do you think that this guy actually saw a ghost and went back and quit his job? Can't blame him if he did. I don't think he necessarily meant that it glowed like that, Paul. I think he meant that it was kind of lit from within enough that you could see the figure. When an apparition appears, sometimes they appear realistic, sometimes they appear as a smoky haze, sometimes they appear as like, you know, a sort of a silhouette. So could have been any number of that, you know. And then again, as I said, I'm not saying these stories are true. I'm saying they're a possibility. So you have to take that how you will. Anyway, I think, yeah, you're probably right, Mary. He may have. I mean, if it's a real story, I could see, you know, somebody being brutally murdered like that, you know, beaten, stabbed, shot. I think they would have reason to hang around, want to scare the crap out of some people. You know, payback's a bitch. And karma comes in all kinds of forms, right? Ghosts may choose to appear in any way. Yeah, true. Uh, and sometimes they appear in ways that people can't handle. It all depends on, I mean, I think spirits can have moods just like, just like we can. If they're in the mood to be an ass, they can appear in some way to deliberately freak you out. Or, if they're in a decent mood, they can appear in a way that is not so frightening. All depends on the kind of mood they're in, I guess. And it also may depend on the way they died. If they were murdered like that viciously, and you know, I could see them appearing uh, in like two different ways. Like maybe one way would be to appear, like asking for help. Being like, help me, or then again, if they were pissed off about what happened, they may appear in one of those, just jump out and scare the shit out of you kind of ways. So, hello, Modeb, Modeb 33. Did I say that right? McDeb. Okay, my bad. I can't see worth crap. Got to get my glasses fixed. Anyway, um, yeah, this may be a short show. These stories go pretty quick, but and okay, yeah, there's my dog, my baby come in. She usually does the shows with me, y'all. So, um, glad you came, McDeb. I hope you enjoy it, and we do these on Monday night also. If you want to come back and visit with us on the Paranormal Graveyard. Okay, this one is called "Don't Turn on the Light." Now, I like this one because it kind of leaves you with an old shit outlook. The dog should be your mascot. She is my mascot. She's my sidekick. She's my fur baby, my pal, and so she sleeps with me every night. Uh, anyway, um, she commandeered the room in the basement of her dorm as soon as she realized she would have to pull an all-nighter in order to prepare for tomorrow's final exam. Her roommate, Jenna, liked to get to bed early, so she packed up everything she thought she would need and went downstairs to study and study and study some more. It was 2 o'clock when she realized that she left one of the textbooks upstairs on her bed. With a dramatic sigh, she rose and climbed the stairs slowly to the third-floor dorm room. The lights were dim in the long hallway, and the old boards creaked under her weary tread. She reached her room and turned the handle as softly as she could, pushing the door open just enough to slip inside so that the hall lights wouldn't wake her roommate. The room was filled with a strange metallic smell. She frowned a bit, her arms breaking out into chills. There was a strange feeling of malice in the room, as if a malevolent gaze were fixed upon her. It was a mind trick. The all-nighter was catching up with her. She could hear Jenna breathing on the far side of the room, a heavy sound, almost as if she had been running. Jenna must have picked up a cold during the last tense week before finals. She crept along the wall until she reached her bed, groping among the covers for the stray history textbook. In the silence, she could hear a steady drip, drip, drip sound. She sighed silently. Faculties would have to come to fix the sink in the bathroom again. Her fingers closed on the textbook. She picked it up softly and withdrew from the room as silently as she could. Relieved to be out of the room, she hurried back downstairs, collapsed into an overstuffed chair, and studied until 6 o'clock. She finally decided that enough was enough, and she slipped upstairs now she could get a couple hours sleep before her 9 o'clock exam. The first of the sun's rays were beaming through the windows as she slowly slid the door open, hoping not to awaken Jenna. Her nose was met by an earthy metallic smell a second before her eyes registered the scene in her dorm room. Jenna was spread-eagled on top of her bed against the far wall. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear and her nightdress stained with blood. 2 drops of blood fell from the saturated blanket with a drip-drip noise that sounded like a leaky faucet. Scream after scream poured from her mouth, but she couldn't stop herself any more than she could cease wringing her hands. All along the hallway, doors slammed and footsteps came running down the passage. Within moments, other students had gathered in her doorway, and one of her friends gripped her arm with a shaking hand and pointed to a trembling finger toward the wall. Her eyes widened in shock at what she saw. Then she fainted into her friend's arms. On the wall above her bed, written in her roommate's blood, were the words, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" Now, is that creepy, people, or what? I could just see something like that. But then again, in most stories like that, if a person came into the room while this was going on, do you think they'd let them leave? Probably not. But for the sake of the story, it made it all the better. I scream. Okay. Anyway, I like that story, people. It's that's one of those do you want to turn out the light when you go to bed type stories. Being as it is, you know, it's a good story. You know, it kind of leaves you with the chill. Now, is it true? Don't know. But if it is, it can happen to anybody, right? We got any college students in here that sleep in a dorm room? Just ask. Okay. We're almost a half hour in, and this is the last story that I have. They go too fast. Anyway, but it's all fun. So maybe next week we can get the full hour in. What do you think? The thing is, it's finals week at my college. I still have to do exams. Yeah, but you don't sleep in a dorm room, do you? Anyway. Thank you. Thank you very much, as Elvis would say. Thank you. Thank you very much. This one is called No Trespassing. Peggy and her boyfriend Tommy were driving down a lonely stretch of highway at dusk when a thunderstorm came crashing down on them. Tommy slowed the car and they crept their way past a formidable abandoned house. Plastered all over the fences and trees were no trespassing signs. A mile past the house, the car hydroplaned. Peggy screamed as the car slid off the road, plunging down into a gully. The car slammed into a large boulder, throwing Peggy violently into the door before it came to rest under a pecan tree. Her head banged against the window, and the stabbing pain shot through her shoulder and arm. Tommy turned to her. "Are you all right? You're bleeding." "Arm, shoulder, feel bad," Peggy managed to gasp. Tommy glanced cautiously at her right arm. "I think your arm is broken," he said, and he tore a strip off his shirt and pressed it to the cut on her head. "I'm going to call for help," he said, when it became obvious that the bleeding was not going to stop right away. But neither of them had their cell phones. Imagine that. "That house we just passed will have a phone I can use," Tommy said. Peggy's eyes popped wide open at this statement. Despite her pain, she remembered the creepy abandoned house. "Stay here. A car will come." "I can't stay, Peggy," Tommy said. "It could take hours for another car to come, and you're losing too much blood." He tore another strip from his shirt and placed it gently on the cut. Then he went out and retrieved a couple of blankets from the trunk to cover her with. "I'll be back as soon as I can." He raced out into the storm, shutting the dented car door behind him. Peggy drifted in a kind of daze. Something at the back of her mind was making her uneasy. She slid down to the floor and put her head on the seat, completely covering herself with the blankets, head and all. Feeling safer, she allowed the weariness caused by the wounds to take over and fell asleep. Peggy wasn't sure what woke her. Had a beam of light shone briefly through the blanket? Did she hear someone curse outside? She strained her eyes and ears, but heard nothing save the soft thudding of rain, and no light shone through the blanket now. If Tommy had arrived with the rescue squad, there surely would have been noises and light and many voices. But she heard nothing save the swish of the rain and the occasional thumping noise, which she put down to the rubbing of the branches of the pecan tree in the wind. The sound should have been comforting, but it was not. Goosebumps crawled across her arms, even the broken one, and she almost ceased breathing for some time as some deep part of her inner mind instructed her to freeze and not make a sound. She did not know how long. Fear kept her immobile, but suddenly the raw terror ceased, replaced by cold shivers of apprehension and a sick coil in her stomach that had nothing to do with her injuries. Something terrible had happened, she thought wearily, fear adding yet more fatigue to her already wounded body. Then she scolded herself for a ninny. It was just her sore head making her imagine things. Somewhat comforted by this thought, she dozed again, only vaguely aware of a new sound that had not been there before. A soft thud, thud sound, as of something gently tapping the roof. Thud, thud, pattering of the rain. Thud, thud, silence. Sometimes she would almost waken and listen to it in a puzzled manner. Thud, thud, patter of rain. Thud, thud. Had a branch dislodged from the tree? Peggy wasn't sure how long she'd been unconscious when she was awakened by a bright light blazing through the window of the car and the sound of male voices exclaiming in horror. A door was wrenched open and someone crawled inside. She lifted her head and looked up at a young state policeman. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, and then turned over his shoulder to call for help. Peggy told the officers her story and begged them to look for Tommy. They definitely avoided answering her and instead called the paramedics. As the paramedics carried her carefully up the slope of the incline, Peggy looked back at the car and saw a grotesque figure hanging from a branch of the pecan tree. For a moment, her brain couldn't decipher what she was seeing. In the bright lights of the police car parked at the side of the road, then she heard a thud thud sound as the foot of the figure scraped the roof top of the totaled car, and she started screaming over and over in horror. One of the police officers hastened to block her view, and a paramedic fumbled for some Valium to give her as her mind finally registered what she had seen. Tommy's mangled dead body was hanging from the concrete just above the car, and nailed to the center of his chest was a no trespassing sign. Woo! That's a good one, is it not? Anybody want to go for a ride? It's raining and storming here. Any volunteers want to go for a ride? Maybe hydroplane a little bit. Anyways, thanks. I appreciate all the good comments over there. Not if you're going to leave me in the car. Okay. Well, you might not want to go to the house with the no trespassing signs. You might be better off staying in the car. Just an afterthought there. Oh, come on, Meg. You know you want to go for a ride. Oh, what are you trying to say there, McDib? Hello, Miss Paula. I didn't see you over there. McDib, you don't want to go for a ride on a good, wet, rainy road, hydroplane. I don't think chicken soup would help. Okay, Deborah Fawcett, I know who you are now. Okay, only if we have ghost boxes. Really? Okay. Well, I've got a PSP 7. I can take that along, I guess. Hello, Miss Paula. Glad you came. Oh, you missed the stories. I don't know if you heard the last one or not. Yeah, take notice of the notice. If it says no trespassing, about 50 signs tacked to the fence, the trees, and the house, and everywhere else. You kind of might not want to go there. But then again, knowing me, yeah, if I had a friend or somebody that was hurt in the car and gully, I'd go there. You know, I mean, the worst they could do is kill me. Okay. Monday night, people, the Paranormal Graveyard will be back with Demons and Evil Spirits. Yeah. Then Wednesday night, Half Past Dead Paranormal will be interviewing J.P. Doyle of Just Paranormal, and that's going to be awesome. He's a funny paranormal loving guy, and you ought to watch some of his videos. They're good, but they're funny also. Let's see what else I got going on. Oh, and we will have another edition of Ghostly Stories on the 29th. Okay, so we'll be skipping a week. We'll be doing Half Past Dead with JP. And then on the 29th, Ghost Stories will be back. And we'll have some more good, fun-loving stuff for y'all to listen to. Someday we have to go to Woolly Burger Cemetery. Woolly Burger Cemetery. Who in the world is going to name it? Why would you name a cemetery Woolly Burger? I'm waiting. Woolly Burger. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really hope y'all enjoyed this. Like I said, it's a little short, but running solo with nobody to bank stuff off of, it's kind of hard to carry on very much. I can only say what I can say and tell you some good, interesting stories. Thanks a lot, McDeb. You rock. What can I tell you? All kinds of stuff is supposed to happen there. Okay. That still doesn't explain why somebody would name a cemetery Woolly Burger. And I know there's got to be a story behind that. So if you figure out what the story is behind the name Woolly Burger Cemetery, let me know. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it, buddy. Don't know if that's what it's called. Well, that's what I want to know. Why is it called that? There's got to be a story behind that name. Okay. So if somebody figures out why the name Woolly Burger, PM me on Facebook. Let me know. I think it'd be all right. Yes, your best creepy stuff. Good. Check on that name. Let me know. I think it'd be interesting to find out why you would name a cemetery Woolly Burger. I was thinking Woolly Booger because I've heard that name before. We used to have a dog named Woolly Booger, actually. But Woolly Burger Cemetery, there's got to be a reason for that. So if anybody figures out what the reason is, be sure and let me know. I want all the juicy details, okay? I want to know everything. With that being said, we actually did almost get 40 minutes into the show. And hope you guys like my picture there I put up for everybody to look at. All right, everybody, I'm going to say good night here. I'm going to close this thing up since how there's not much left to talk about. Until next time, we'll see everybody on Monday night. Paula, be sure to come back on Monday night for the Paranormal Graveyard. Starts at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. We'll see everybody then. Good night, y'all.